Hello everyone, in today's video we are going to create an active directory in a home lab environment using VirtualBox. So our key objectives for today's lab will be to install a Windows server, we'll install a Windows 10 machine which will be our client, we'll assign IP address for internal network on the server, and we'll install an active directory and create a domain. Also, we'll configure remote access services and network address translation so our client can join the internet through our domain controller, and we'll set up a DHCP server on domain controller so we can assign those IP addresses that will create automatically to our network devices. And we'll join the client that we'll set up to our domain controller so we can manage it in a centralized manner. So let's go over the graphical view of our lab for today. So like I just pointed out the lab objectives, we'll need a Oracle VirtualBox, we'll need one client which will be a Windows 10 Enterprise, and we'll configure a network interface card for the internal purposes only. So then we'll set up another device which will be our domain controller, and we'll set up two network interface cards, one for accessing the internet and the one that will be for internal use. And also on the domain controller we're gonna create the domain, and we'll create active directory in here. We'll assign that we'll configure a remote access server and network address translation, and we'll give it a pool of addresses using DHCP Server. So we can assign those IP addresses automatically to all devices that will add to our network. So let's explain first what's an active directory. So an active directory, it's like a database and a set of different services that we can configure and use in our network, like company. For example, it's easy to manage all the devices and all the users that access those devices in our network by managing them through Active Directory, because Active Directory is more like a centralized overview or structure that we can deploy and control our network, also see the hierarchical structure of our network, and be able to audit it easier, and also deploy like policies and rules, so we can sort devices based on the groups, based on certain permissions that they may have or who can access those devices. And also we will have critical information about those devices and the users that we have in our network. So it's going to be easier to manage the permissions and the roles and the usage of certain devices and access to those devices by the users. And for the users, what's convenient that they can use their account that the IT administrators create for them on the Active Directory. They can use it on any device that they have permission to use it, and they can access the resources from wherever they are inside the company. Whichever machine is joined to the Active Directory, they'll be able to access it. So basically that's the Active Directory. It's used by most corporations. It's very handy and helpful in having a glance overview over our network infrastructure. So let's go back to our diagram. So we need a Oracle VirtualBox. In this video I'm not going to show how to install a Oracle VirtualBox, but I'm going to add the links to it in the description so you can go on and download it. So the website is going to be virtualbox.org, and you can go to downloads, and based on what device you have, you can choose the platform package that you need. So if you have a Windows, you come to Windows hosts and I'll download this file and install on your device. So once you have the VirtualBox installed, we need two more files to download, which will be our server ISO image and our client, which in our case will be a Windows 10 Enterprise ISO image. So to do so, we go to Microsoft, and I'm gonna link those address in these links. I'm gonna add those links in the description so you can easily go and download them. So basically, you'll follow the first link going to Windows 10 Enterprise, and here's gonna be the ISO image that you'll need to download. Click continue, and it'll ask you to provide some information before downloading, and then it will give the button where you can download this file. And the second one, you will come to the link where we download the Windows Server, and it's gonna be the same process. We'll select ISO image, continue. I'll give the details that they asking here, and we'll download these files. So once we have VirtualBox set up and those two files available, then we can move on and set up our infrastructure. And based on our diagram, we're gonna configure first our domain server. So first we'll need to install it, and to do so we'll come to our VirtualBox. Yours is not gonna have any virtual machines in here, so just ignore those, and you'll come and create a new virtual machine. So we'll give it a name. In our case, I'll just call it domain controller DC, and for the version I'm just gonna choose other Windows and 64-bit, and continue next. It's asked to give it some memory size. I'll just give it 4 gigabytes. You can give it 2 gigabytes. It depends on your resources that you have on your computer. So click next, create. Yes, dynamically allocated. Yep, default. And now we have created a VirtualBox, but we need to configure it and make some changes on it. So we'll go to settings, make it smaller. So in settings we'll go to advanced. If you want to have ability to copy and paste inside this virtual machine, you will come and give it bidirectional, and also if you want to drag and drop inside this virtual machine, you can give it a bidirectional as well. So it depends. If you want to have these features available, you come and set it up here, and we'll go to system. We gave it already the memory size. We'll go to processor. I'll just give it 3 cores, and we'll move to the network side. So for the network side, like we discussed, that we need to configure 2 network interface cards. So by default, it's gonna have one network interface card set up already for us. So it's network address translation 1. And what it does, it's gonna use the public address of your machine or your computer to access the internet. So in our case, this will be the one that we have already by default. So we need to set up another one that will be our internal network interface card. So our devices inside the network can access it on the other adapter. So we'll just add another adapter, enable it, and we'll choose internal network. And for the name, we'll just choose the internet because it's not a demilitarized zone. So we'll choose this one and click OK. Also, you can increase the display video memory here, and we have it set up in settings. And now we need to insert our ISO image that we have downloaded. So you can click start, or you can even do it in settings, whichever is more convenient. So I'll just click start on it, and it'll prompt a screen. That's the screen it prompts up, and we'll click here on the file and add. And here is those files that I have downloaded. If you have them in different folder, just go there and find the one that you've downloaded. So I know that this one is the server file ISO image, so I'm just click on it and open it and choose it, start. So now it's gonna start setting up our virtual machine for our server. So I'll just wait for it, and whenever it's gonna load it up, I'll resume the video. So we have a basic setup in here coming. I'll just increase the size of it so we can see it better, and we'll click next and install. So the setup itself is kind of lagging, and we'll need to come and insert our add addition image in that, but we'll do it later. So here we'll just choose like a desktop experience because we want to have a GUI interface. Otherwise, if you choose just a regular run standard evolution, you'll just have a CLI interface. So I'll click next. I'll accept the license, and here we'll choose to set up a custom install. So we'll erase everything and set up a new, a clean disk image, and click next. So the machine will take some time to start installing and configure everything, so I'll just pause and I'll wait for it. So during the installation, when it's done, it's gonna restart the machine, and like you'll see a black screen and saying like to press any key. So just don't press anything, just let it load by itself, and it will start restarting the machine. Otherwise you may break something and we'll have to redo it again. So once it's boot up, it's gonna show you that blue screen, and it's gonna ask you to create a password for the main account administrator. So just go and give it a password. And click finish. So after this we can open our server, and also we can increase the size here. So there is a couple ways that how you can open, like unlock this screen. Like you can press Ctrl Alt Delete, but it will not work if you do it on your keyboard. So what you can do, like for the virtual machine, for the Oracle virtual machine, is gonna be the right side control and delete. And if you press those hotkeys, it will open up. Also, you can use here input, keyboard, and insert Control Alt Delete. It will do the same job. If you don't have this one, you can just press the right control and delete at the same time, and it will be prompted to insert your password. Also, I can point it out that these hotkeys can be set up in preferences. If you go to input and if you choose the virtual machine, you can see that hotkeys for which you have already set up, and you can change them if you want. See? So that's how you can check it out, those hotkeys. So let's go back to our server. I'll give it the password I have set it up, and we'll get into the server. So first thing that we can do after we get into our server, we can come and insert our guest addition CD image. So what this is gonna do is gonna fix this lagging, and also like when we'll make the windows bigger, like we'll adjust the size, it will automatically adjust the size as well. So we'll not see this like small screen inside like now. So to do so, I'll just close this default. It's opening by default the server manager. So I'll just close this and come to our file and go to this PC and we'll have that VirtualBox guest edition. So we'll come here and choose the 64 one, click on it, and we'll set up here real quick. We'll let install it and install. And after we finish, we can reboot it now, so we can apply these changes that we've made and have like a more convenient way to navigate this device. So on the machine booted up, Control Delete, insert the password. Alright, so I'll close all this. So now we should have this working. You can see how it's adjusting the size because we inserted guest image addition, guest addition image. So let's go back to our diagram. So far we just installed the server. Now we need to go and figure it out which from those two network interface cards that we applied in our Oracle VM VirtualBox, which of them are internet and which one we need to assign IP addresses. So that's the IP address we are going to assign to it, a mask and DNS. So let's go to our network and change adapter options. Alright, so here is those two network interface cards that we have set it up, and now we need to find out which is the internet one and which is the one we set it up for internal use. So to figure it out which is which, we'll click on it, status, and we'll check the status of each of them. So this one, details, so we can see this one has everything set up. We have an IPv4 address, we have the subnet, we have DHCP server, DNS, so it means this is our internet because it has connections to internet. So this is, we can rename it so we know that that's our internet. So I'll click on rename and we'll tell it internet, and I'll click on this one, check its status. So we can see that this one doesn't have any DNS server assigned, nor the default gateway. So, and plus it has the the IPv4 address of our virtual machine. So this is the one it's set up for internal purposes, and this one that we are going to configure statically. So to do so, we can click on properties and IPv4 and use the following IPs. So based on our diagram, we gave it 172.16.01 for the IP address and the subnet of 24. So 172.16.01 and subnet 24, so 255, and we'll not set up any default gateway because the default gateway will be our external network external interface card. And for the DNS server, we are going this is gonna be our DNS server itself, so we'll just give it a loopback address, which is 127.0.0.1, or you can give it the same IP address. So basically the DNS will be the server itself. And click OK and OK, and let's see details. So we got everything set up, mask, IP address, and we are good to go. Close. So we set up those interfaces. Now let's go back to our diagram. So we have this and this configured. Now we are going to set up an Active Directory domain service. So let's go back. So before setting up the domain service, I would like to rename this PC so we know that that's our domain controller. So come to settings. And about rename this PC, and see, because I have a keyword in here, so we'll just call it DC. Next, and we'll need to reboot the machine to assign all these changes that we've done so far. So I'm just going to reboot the machine now, and we'll come back whenever it's rebooted. So the machine has rebooted. I just closed the windows here because by default you'll see the server manager. But to do so, I'll just want to show you up how you can find it. So it's here, server manager. Click on it, and it will open the same default page. So I'll close this tab, and now based on our diagram, we need to set up our Active Directory services. So to do so, we'll come add roles and features, and click next. Yes, role based. Next, and this is our server that we're gonna use where we want to install this domain Active Directory. So click next, and we need to choose the service that we want to add. And in this particular case, we want to set up an Active Directory domain services. Click on this and add that feature, and then click next. And here I'll leave everything by default. Next, and install. So it's gonna take a while to install that service, and then we'll come back and configure it. So the Active Directory service has been installed, and we can close it. And we need to configure it now. You see, you got like a flag in here, which says that we need to deploy our configuration. So promote this service to a domain controller. So we need to set up a domain for it. So we'll click on promote the server to domain controller, and we'll need to create a new forest because we are setting up a new domain at wall. So we'll click on add new forest, and we'll name it, and based on my diagram I called it dcdomain.com. You can call it whatever you want, dcdomain.com, and click next. So it's gonna ask us to give it a password. Click next. The domain name, the DNS server cannot be created because the authoritative parent zone cannot be found. So the DNS servers actually should be created for us. So click next. Next. I mean, all these steps, they may take some time, so I'm just pausing to save you guys some time, but usually it may take like a few seconds, maybe 10-20, so just to know that it's not that fast as I'm going through the video. And we'll install. So once installation is done, it's gonna restart automatically. And actually the installation, it took some time, so bear in mind. So I'll wait for it to restart, and I'll get back once it's finished rebooting. Alright, so all these changes has been applied. It took actually longer again, and now we can see that we have already the domain name / our administrator name. So if we'll have our users in here, it will be the domain name / the username. So that's how it's looking once we have created and applied the domain services. So I'll just give it a password. Okay, So let's boot it up. We can see we have our Active Directory domain services, and also it made for us a couple other services like a DNS and file and storage services. So next step based on our diagram will be to create remote access servers and network address translation. So to do so, we need to come back to our configuration, so we can create add roles and features. Create next, role based, yes, applying to this domain, and we need to select remote access. We'll add this this service. I'll leave it by default, next, and we need to configure the routing in here and add that feature and click next, next. I'll leave it default settings and install this service. Once it's finished installation, we can close it and we get another flag in here which tells us to open and get started with configuring our remote access services at this particular domain controller. So click on open. So we need to go through that adding roles and features through the wizard and click on post deployment. Actually not allows me to go for this. Like, what else we can do? We can go to tools and follow our routing and remote access, and we'll do it from here. So we can see it shows a red arrow, which means that our remote access is not set up. So we'll click on DC local and configure and enable routing and remote access, and we'll be prompted for this access server setup wizard. We'll click next, and we need to select network address translation, so we'll allow internal clients to connect to the internet using one public IP address. So we'll use the network interface card from the domain controller, and here we'll select, it asks what's the public interface to connect to the internet, and we have it in here, internet. Click on it and next and finish, and it will apply these changes. So once the changes are done, we can see we got a green arrow which indicates that our routing and remote access is configured and it's working. So we've done with the part 2, where we configure remote access server and network address translation, and we can let's see what's the flags here. So we'll need to restart our machine to apply all this change. I'll just go and reboot it, and then we'll get back. Alright, so my machine booted up, and I'll just close this in here. And let's go to see what's our next step. So our next step, it will be to create, to configure a DHCP server. So what's actually a DHCP? DHCP is dynamically host configuration protocol, which will assign IP addresses dynamically to the devices inside the network. So also it will renew the leases for them, and will apply the DNS server automatically and the gateway, and also the mask. So basically, instead of going and setting up for each particular device a static IP address, we'll just set up a DHCP server, and the server is gonna do the job for us. And we'll just have to set up a range of pool of IP addresses from where the DHCP server can take the IP address and assign to the devices in the network. So our next step is to set up this DHCP server. To do so, we need to go again to Server Manager, and we'll add roles and features. So basically, what's that roles and features? What we do? We add another services. Like you have like a big range of services that can you install on Active Directory. So we select the one we needed, and we are setting it up. So in this particular case, we need to set up a DHCP server. So add this feature and move on. So here actually it shows which we already have pre-installed. So we have the web server, remote access, file and storage service, and Active Directory. So we'll move next. Here's everything by default. Next, DHCP, and we'll install this service. So our DHCP server has been installed, and now we get another flag, so we need to configure it. Come in here, it says complete DHCP configuration. Click on it, and we'll move next. We'll choose the domain control of the domain name we use in here, and we'll apply it, and then close. And now we can go to tools and find our DHCP service, click on it, and we'll see what else we need to set up there. So we have our DHCP server in here, and it's running. We have green lights, and we have an IPv4 addresses, IPv6 addresses. So what we have in the server options, so we need to set up this policies, filters. So you can allow basically what's the purpose of having a domain controller on the network. You can apply certain rules which will allow or deny certain traffic or certain IP addresses or certain application and so on. So that's the good part about having a domain controller as a router, and also as a proxy. So we'll need to click on the domain, and we'll need to create a new scope. So we'll click on IPv4 and create a new scope, because what we want to do now, we need to assign those address ranges that we can use for our network to be retrieved, those IP addresses from that pool of addresses and assigned to the devices inside the network. So we'll click next. We'll give it a name for this particular scope, and we'll just call it DHCP IP address pool, and next. And here we're gonna enter the range of the addresses that we want to give it for this scope. So it's gonna be 172 16 0 and 100 to 172 16 0 200, and the subnet mask, we have it at /24. So click next, and now it asks to exclude a certain IP addresses or a range that we want. So for example, let's say we have a particular IPv4 address from that particular range that we assign, that we have used for certain devices and applied it statically. So we'll come in here and include this IPv4 address and tell the DHCP do not use this particular IP address because it's already in use. So that's the point of excluding those IP addresses in here. Then we come to list duration. So all DHCP server will have a list duration. So what it means? It means like how long a device can keep this IP address, and once the time exceeded, then the device will need to have a renewal for this lease. So here you can choose how often you want this leases to be terminated, because it depends on the network and what devices are coming in and out of that particular network. Maybe you want to have a shorter time frame for the lease, so like the devices come and go and you can be released back those IP addresses, so you can assign to other devices. In our case, we'll just give it as default. We just do the lab in here, so we don't really think about this. And then it asks us to configure the DHCP option. So yes, we want to configure the option now, and click next. And here it asks to give the default gateway. So in our case, we choose the default gateway to be our IP address for this internal network interface card. So whenever the devices inside network wants to communicate with internet, it will send information and ask for access to go to internet to our default gateway, and in our case will be this internal network, and the IP address will be that 172.16.0.1. So we'll insert this one in here, 172.16.0.1, and add, and we have added in here, and click next. Then we want to see this IP address in here, so it's already inside. And yes, the parent domain will be dcdomain.com, and domain name and DNS. So this will be also the DNS server for us. So click next. The Win server, we are not setting up in here anything to communicate, like to translate IP addresses for the net buyers. So we'll just skip next. And yes, I want to activate the scope now, so we can have the pool range available for assignment, and finish. So we have the scope in here, and if we click on it, we have address pool, and here is our address pool that we assigned. So we have a range from 100 to 200, and then address leases. So here, whenever we'll have devices already using DHCP server and have the IP addresses applied to them, we'll see those devices in here and the details about those devices. And also you can create reservations if you want to add that a certain device can have always the same IP address assigned to it. And scope options, router. So we have a router in here, we have a DNS server assigned, and the domain name. So basically at this point we should be good to go with configuring our client and setting it up and joining to our domain. But before we do so, I just wanted to show you how you can create users and how the group policies are working in here. So to do so, we need to go to Windows Administrative Tools and choose Active Directory Users and Computers. So this part will contain details about the users and computers and critical information about them. So just put it up. So we have this service here. It's so lagging I'll just restart the machine and let it apply all these changes, and also maybe it'll run a bit better. It's just lagging for me. So my machine booted up, and let's go quick and show you guys how we can create some users and groups. So I'll go to Windows Administrative Tools and choose Active Directory Users and Computers. So once you're here, you will see the domain name, and we can expand it and see like we have a bulletin here, and inside the bulletin we have like pre-configured kind of security groups that you can use to apply rules. And then we have computers. So here we'll have our devices. If we have set up some computers, we'll have them in here, and we can apply permissions and rules on them. And then we will have the domain controller. In our case, we just have one. And we'll have also the users. So we have some users in here, like administrator, guest, and some security groups as well. So if we want to add a new group, when we want to create a new group, we'll come in here and create a new organizational unit. We'll create like a folder, and we'll call it like IT admins. And okay, so now we have this organizational folder, and we can go and create inside it, let's say, users, right? Or a group, let's say a group like Helpdesk group, and we'll create a Helpdesk group, and we'll click on the Helpdesk group property and see it's not a member of any groups. So we can come and add to be a member of this IT admins, and we'll start typing in here IT admin, and we'll check, and it will find the one we have. So I just won't type it this way. So name not found. Okay, because even this IT group is not assigned to any particular group. So to do so, we'll go to properties and manage by general. So that's the group, the organizational unit that we have, but we can set up this helpdesk to be part of let's say an administrative group, right? So we'll come in here and we'll choose the one that we have in our users security groups. So we saw that there is administrator, so let's choose the administrators and apply. And now if we check that helpdesk group will be part of this member of this security group administrators. So what else we can do? We can create users. Let's say we want to create a new user, and let's say we'll call him Jim Miller, and we'll give it a login name J Miller, and next it was to give him a password. So we'll, like, if it's not set up for us, we'll want him to change the password when he'll next time try to log on. So we'll give him a password now, and whenever he'll try to log in, he will be prompted to get a new password to set up for himself. And I'll just leave it like this, Powerful Level Express. We'll use this as an IT administrator because we don't want to use like default administrator account to always log into our domain server. So we'll set up users, and in our case we'll set up an administrator users that we can come and log into our domain server, but do not use the default one, the main administrator account. So I'll give it a password. And configure. next, finish. So now we have a user, and we can assign this user, like he's not member of any groups, just maybe IT administrator, let's see. So it's just member of the domain users, and we can add him to be member of the help desk. I mean, help desk is not by default, so we'll have to give it the permission for administrators, domain administrators, because I won't use it as a main account that I can use to come and log into the domain server and do the configurations. So we'll choose the domain admin and check admins. Okay, apply. Okay, so if we'll check it now, we should see it's member of the domain users and domain admins. So basically that's how you create users and groups and organizational units, and based on this then you can apply permissions for them. And let's say create a group for help desk, you give them permissions to read certain files, and you apply it on this particular organizational unit, and it will apply for all the users in this particular organizational unit. So that's how we set up users and groups. And now let's go and set up our client, which will be our Windows 10 Enterprise. So I'll just put this in the pause for now. So we'll come and create a new device. We'll put client Win 10, and we got Win 10 64-bit. Next, I'll leave it by default 2 GB. Create ADI dynamically and create a user. Create the virtual machine. Come to settings. Now I can leave it by default. Our processor will give it a couple cores so we can run it faster. Display default, and network for the network, because we don't want this device to communicate directly to internet, and we want it to communicate with our domain controller. We'll use an internal network adapter, and we'll configure it later. So this, and we'll start and we'll insert our ISO images into it. So I'm waiting for it to prompt up. So we have this window opened, and we need to find our insert, and this is my client enterprise. Open, choose, start, and now it's gonna start the machine. So the process is somewhat similar. Install, wait for it to be installed, accept the license, and set up from the beginning a custom. We'll erase all the all formatted disk space that we create for this particular machine, and we'll start installation. Right, so the machine is booting up. Right, so now we got the basic process installing the device. Password, leave it empty. I'll just disconnect all these settings, I don't need them. And accept. So our machine has been installed and now it can be ready for use. And before we do so, I'll just go and start running my DC again and make sure everything there is running, like Dhcp Server, and we'll come back to our Windows machine and finish our setup. So no internet. Let's see what's going on here. Alright, I'll just have to restart the machine and use the administrative credentials for this machine to start it. Let me do this and I'll be back. Basically, I just come and we need to sign out and use the administrator account to log in. So I just want to double check that all the services are running, because I put it on pause and I'm not sure if all the services are connected. Otherwise we'll not be able to get this DHCP addresses for our network. And I want to check the remote routing and remote. Make sure this one is here. Okay, let's go back to our machine. We need to make sure it has the addresses. So we see it's connected to our domain, and we can go and get the IP config to see that we have a default gateway that we assign, and we have the first IP address in here. So now we know that this this virtual machine, this device on this network, like we set it up, it's communicating through our domain controller. And to validate this, we can try to use a ping command to Google and see that we have internet access. So we have a reply, so it means that we have internet access. So the last step is to set up and connect this computer to our domain account. So there is a couple ways to do it, but I'll just go to settings and need about settings, about, and also we want to rename this device, rename this PC, and don't want to call like this. We need to know like what this PC is, but we can do this at the same time as we adding this device to our domain account. So we'll click on rename this PC, advanced, and here we'll name this, let's say, Office 1, and we need to change the domain workup and choose the domain that we have, dc domain.com, and can rename it here Office 1 and click OK, and it's gonna ask us to provide credentials that we are allowed to do these changes. Administrator and password and click OK. And we can see like welcome to the dcdomain.com. So we've joined this particular machine, so we'll need to restart. So the changes will apply, and we'll restart the machine, and the changes will be applied for this device, and then we'll go back to our domain server and we'll see this device over there. So that's our machine. Now see, we can choose to sign into our domain. So now we have this work group in here, so I can use that user I created, Jim Miller, and join with this user account this particular device. So it's gonna set up again because I'm setting up like a new user for it. I'll just wait it for it to boot up, and we'll go and check the other configurations. So you can see we signed in with this user that we created on the Active Directory, and we can see like the name here, OMI DC domain that J Miller. Alright, so I'm gonna put this VM down, and we can go to our Active Directory, and we can go to user accounts and Active Directory users and computers, and we'll go to computers, and we see our Office device in here, properties, and we see the office.1.dcdomain.com workstation, and we have some details about it, and also we can check the DHCP server and see that we have addresses used from it. Go to DHCP. Let's expand this one. Wish it could work faster. I just wanted to showcase the address list, how it should be added in here, but apparently something happened that I cannot have it in here. I mean, I had to restart all the machine. So basically you will have the address list in here shown, and it will tell you that which device is having and what IP address. And I mean, I just wanted to see it on my device. Like, I have everything here working, but it just doesn't show there in the address lists. Even refreshing, not getting anything. But we do have connection, and we can use this is my Active Directory, and that's our virtual desktop that we set up, our client. And we can go actually and make sure that we are using DHCP. I'm going to change adapter setting options, and we'll check the status details. And yes, we can see we have the DHCP server running, everything is running. It just doesn't show here in the list, maybe because of the VM or maybe some issues in there, but our network works, our device can reach internet, and it's set up to be applied, to be managed from our Active Directory, as we showed it in the previous configurations, like we could see our Office 1 computer inside our domain controller. So basically that was all about the Active Directory. It's just a basic setup, but it will give you an overview how to set it up and how to use it, how to set up users and groups and organizational units. Also, if you have a site, like you have two different offices, like physically separated, so you can set up here like a service, a VPN site to site, and have like a public address for the same public address for both of those sites, and you will not have to actually for each particular user to have a VPN connection. You'll have like a site-to-site VPN connection, and all the users will be able to communicate with the users on another side of that VPN connection. So I mean, there is way more services that you can set up on the on the Active Directory, so it's worth to explore and try to do it on your own. So that was about this video, and thank you for joining, and have a good day.